The medical bay smelled like disinfectant and blood. Taemin moved quickly between the beds, checking on his patients. His hands were steady as he adjusted an IV drip for a wounded soldier. The soldier had blue skin and 4 arms. He was from a species called the Thrin. Taemin had learned to treat dozens of different alien species since joining the Coalition fleet. The ship, Eternal Vigil, had just returned from a terrible battle. The medical bay was full of injured soldiers. Taemin had been working for 18 hours straight. His back ached and his eyes burned with tiredness, but he could not stop. People needed him. Hanul walked up to him carrying a cup of coffee. She was his closest friend on the ship. Like him, she was human, and like him, she often felt like an outsider among the alien crew. "You need to rest," Hanul said, holding out the cup. "Later," Taemin replied. He moved to the next patient, a young pilot with green scales covering her body. Hanul sighed. She knew Taemin would not rest until every patient was stable. That was just who he was. He had been like this since his younger sister died back on Earth. She had been sick and the doctors could not save her. Taemin had promised himself that day that he would never give up on a patient. Never. Across the room, Dr. Kethra watched Taemin work. She was a Vrin with an insect-like body and large compound eyes. She was the senior medical officer on the ship, and she did not like humans very much. In her opinion, human medicine was primitive and outdated. Humans were too new to space travel, too inexperienced. They did not belong in Coalition hospitals, but she had to admit grudgingly that this human doctor was skilled. He worked fast and rarely made mistakes. Still, she would never say this out loud. Suddenly, the doors to the medical bay burst open with a crash that made everyone jump. A massive figure filled the doorway. It was Commander Vexithor, one of the most feared warriors in the Coalition fleet. He stood over 8 feet tall with thick scales covering his body like armor. His species, the Kralix, were known throughout the galaxy as the ultimate warriors. They were born to fight. But Vexithor was not in his battle armor now. He was wearing simple clothes, and in his massive arms he carried something small and fragile. It was a young Kralix, barely 3 months old. The cub's scales were soft and pale, not yet hardened like his father's. His eyes were closed and his small body shook with violent tremors. "Help him," Vexithor said. His voice was rough, desperate. "Please, help my son." Taemin had never heard a Kralix warrior say please before. He had never heard such fear in a warrior's voice. He moved quickly toward Vexithor. "Bring him here," Taemin said, pointing to an empty examination table. Vexithor laid his son down gently, more gently than Taemin would have thought possible for such a large creature. The cub's name was Lix, and he was dying. Even Taemin could see that. Dr. Kethra rushed over and began scanning the young Kralix with her medical instruments. Her face grew more grave with each reading. After several minutes, she stepped back and shook her head. "It is a genetic mutation," she said quietly. "His organs are failing. We have tried every treatment we know. Nothing works. I am sorry, Commander. There is nothing more we can do." Vexithor's amber eyes widened. He looked down at his son, at the small chest struggling to rise and fall with each difficult breath. In Kralix culture, cubs were sacred. They were rare and precious. A Kralix warrior would face any enemy without fear, but the loss of a cub was the one thing that could break them. "No," Vexithor whispered. His voice cracked. "There must be something, anything." Taemin had been watching quietly, studying the scans on Dr. Kethra's instruments. Something about the genetic mutation looked familiar. He had seen something like this before, back on Earth. It was different, yes, but the pattern was similar. "Wait," Taemin said, stepping forward. "I might be able to help." Dr. Kethra turned to him, her compound eyes flashing with irritation. "This is not a human condition. You cannot possibly understand Kralix physiology well enough to—" "I have seen something similar," Taemin interrupted. He knew it was rude to interrupt a senior officer, but time was running out. "On Earth, the pattern of organ failure, the way it spreads. I performed a surgery once on a human child. It was experimental, but it worked." "This is not a human child," Dr. Kethra said coldly. "The risk is too great. The procedure could kill him faster." "He is already dying," Taemin said. He looked directly at Vexithor. "I cannot promise success, but I can promise that I will try. I will fight for him with everything I have." The medical bay had gone silent. Every doctor, every nurse, every patient who could still move had stopped to watch. A human doctor was offering to perform experimental surgery on a Kralix cub. It was unheard of. It was insane. Dr. Kethra spoke again, her voice sharp. Commander, I must advise against this. Human medicine is not advanced enough for such a delicate procedure. The cultural implications alone. Silence. Vexthor's voice cut through the room like a blade. He was staring at Taemin, studying the human doctor's face. Taemin did not look away. He held the warrior's gaze steadily. Vexthor had fought in 100 battles. He had learned to read warriors in the heat of combat, to know who would stand and who would run. He saw something in this small human's eyes. There was no boasting, no false confidence. But there was determination, an iron will that refused to accept defeat. In that moment, Vexthor made his choice. His son would die with certainty if he did nothing. But this human was offering hope. It might be a fool's hope, but it was hope nonetheless. The human will operate, Vexthor said. His voice was loud and clear, leaving no room for argument. Anyone who interferes will answer to me personally. Dr. Kethra stepped back, her mandibles clicking in disapproval. But she said nothing. No one argued with Commander Vexthor. Taemin felt Hanul's hand on his shoulder, a gesture of support. He looked down at little Lix, at the small body fighting so hard to live. Prepare the surgery bay, Taemin said quietly. We start immediately. As the medical staff rushed to prepare, Taemin allowed himself one moment of doubt. He was about to attempt something that had never been done before. He could fail. He could make things worse. The weight of a young life rested entirely on his shoulders, but then he thought of his sister. He thought of the promise he made. He would not give up. He would fight until the very end, no matter the odds. Taemin took a deep breath and began scrubbing his hands for surgery. Behind him, Commander Vexthor stood like a statue, watching his son with eyes full of desperate hope. The entire medical bay seemed to hold its breath. The impossible was about to begin. The surgery bay was cold and bright. Taemin stood at the sink, scrubbing his hands and arms carefully. Through the window, he could see the observation deck filling with people. Word had spread fast through the ship. A human was going to operate on a Kralix cub. Everyone wanted to watch. Hanul worked beside him, preparing the surgical instruments. She had assisted Taemin in dozens of operations, but never anything like this. Her hands moved quickly and efficiently, but Taemin could see the worry in her eyes. You can do this, she whispered to him. Taemin nodded. He had to believe that. Failure was not an option. Dr. Kethra entered the surgery bay reluctantly. Despite her objections, she had agreed to assist. She knew more about Kralix anatomy than anyone else on the ship. Without her knowledge, the surgery would be impossible. The respiratory system is different from humans, she said stiffly. The heart has 4 chambers instead of 3. The blood chemistry is highly alkaline. One mistake with the anesthesia and he will die. I understand, Taemin said calmly. Walk me through it step by step. Little Lix lay on the operating table, looking even smaller under the bright lights. His breathing was shallow and irregular. His small chest barely moved. Taemin placed his hand gently on the cub's forehead. The scales felt warm, too warm. Fever was setting in. We need to start now, Taemin said. Through the window, Commander Vexthor watched. He stood perfectly still, but his hands were clenched into fists. Other Kralix warriors had joined him. They filled the observation deck with their massive forms, silent witnesses to this desperate gamble. The surgery began. Taemin made the first incision carefully, following Dr. Kethra's instructions about Kralix anatomy. The tissue was denser than human tissue, tougher. He adjusted his technique accordingly. The primary organ is here, Dr. Kethra said, pointing with one of her thin limbs. It processes nutrients and filters toxins. In his case, it has stopped functioning correctly. Taemin examined the organ carefully. It was inflamed and discolored. But what worried him more was what he found next. The mutation was not affecting just one organ. It was affecting 3. They were all connected, all failing together. This is worse than I thought, he muttered. Hanul looked at him with concern. Can you still do it? Taemin did not answer immediately. His mind was racing, calculating options. The procedure he had planned would not be enough. He needed to do something more radical, something riskier. Yes, he finally said, but it will take longer than I expected. Hours passed. Taemin worked with steady concentration, his hands moving with practiced precision. Every cut had to be perfect. Every suture had to hold. There was no room for error. Dr. Kethra found herself impressed despite her prejudices. The human's technique was unconventional, but it was effective. He adapted quickly when something did not work, trying different approaches until he found one that did. His blood pressure is dropping, Hanul said, watching the monitors. Taemin adjusted the IV drip without looking up from his work. Increase the flow rate by 10%. The surgery continued. 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. Taemin's back ached from standing in one position for so long. His eyes burned with fatigue. But he did not stop. He could not stop. You need a break, Hanul said quietly. Not yet, Taemin replied. His voice was firm. In the observation deck, some of the watchers had left. But the Kralix warriors remained. And Commander Vexthor had not moved at all. He stood like a statue, his eyes never leaving his son. 7 hours, 8 hours. The surgery entered its most critical phase. Taemin had to reconnect the 3 failing organs in a way that would allow them to support each other. It was delicate work. One wrong move could cause catastrophic bleeding. Dr. Kethra handed him instruments before he even asked for them. She had begun to understand his methods, to anticipate his needs. They were working together now, truly working together, their species' differences forgotten in the urgency of the moment. 9 hours into the surgery, disaster struck. The monitors began screaming alarms. Lix's heart rate plummeted. His blood pressure crashed. The young Kralix was dying on the table. He is going into cardiac arrest, Dr. Kethra said urgently. Hanul looked at Taemin in panic. What do we do? Taemin's mind raced. He had seconds to make a decision. The standard procedure would not work. Kralix's physiology was too different. He needed something else, something new. Then, in a flash of insight, he saw it. A solution that had never been tried on any species. It was risky. It was probably crazy, but it was Lix's only chance. Give me the micro-suture kit, Taemin said. His voice was calm, controlled. And prepare a bypass pump. Dr. Kethra stared at him. What are you planning? I am going to create a biological bridge, Taemin said. His hands moved quickly, already beginning the procedure. Connect the organs directly so they can share function. If one is weak, the others will compensate. That is impossible, Dr. Kethra said. It has never been done. Then we will be the first, Taemin replied. His hands moved with incredible speed and precision. He worked with a confidence born of desperation, guided by instinct and years of experience. The monitors continued to scream. Time was running out. Hanul held her breath. Dr. Kethra watched in fascination. In the observation deck, Commander Vexthor stepped closer to the window, his massive form rigid with tension. Taemin completed the final suture. He stepped back. Come on, he whispered. Come on, Lix, fight. For a long moment, nothing happened. The alarms continued. The monitors showed flat lines, then slowly a beep. Then another. A heartbeat registered on the monitor. Weak but steady, then stronger. Lix's chest rose with a breath. His small body stirred. And then his eyes opened, just for a moment before closing again in exhausted sleep. The surgery bay erupted in gasps and exclamations. Hanul grabbed Taemin's arm, tears in her eyes. Dr. Kethra stood frozen, her mandibles clicking in disbelief. Taemin sagged against the operating table, exhaustion finally hitting him. But he was smiling. The young Kralix was alive. Against all odds, against all logic, Lix was alive. In the observation deck, Commander Vexthor placed one massive hand against the window. His shoulders shook with emotion he could not contain. The human had done the impossible. Lix lay in a special medical pod in the recovery ward. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped softly. His small chest rose and fell with each breath. He was alive, but he was not safe yet. Taemin sat beside the pod, watching the monitors carefully. He had not left since the surgery ended 12 hours ago. His eyes were red from tiredness, but he refused to sleep. You need to rest, Hanul said, bringing him a cup of coffee. She looked worried about her friend. Later, Taemin said, not taking his eyes off the screens. His body is still adjusting to the changes. Any problem could be dangerous. Commander Vexthor stood on the other side of the pod. The massive warrior had not left either. He watched his son with fierce attention, as if he could keep the cub alive through willpower alone. How is he? Vexthor asked. His voice was rough with emotion. Stable, Taemin replied. His organs are working together well. The biological bridge I created is holding, but we need to watch for infection and rejection. The next few days are critical. Vexthor nodded slowly. He reached out with one large hand and gently touched the pod's transparent surface, right above where his son slept. The gesture was tender, so different from the fierce warrior everyone knew. Hours passed in quiet watch. Taemin made small adjustments to the medications. He checked readings. He monitored every change in Lix's condition. As the night deepened, Vexthor finally spoke again. I did not believe a human could do this. I thought your kind was weak, soft, not fit for space or war. Taemin smiled slightly. Many think that. I am used to it. I was wrong, Vexthor said firmly. You have a different kind of strength. A strength I did not understand. Tell me about Lix, Taemin said, changing the subject. About your family. Vexthor was quiet for a moment. Then he began to talk. He told Taemin about Kralix culture, about how rare their children were, about how each cub was precious beyond measure. In my species, we are warriors, Vexthor explained. We train to fight from the moment we can walk. But our young are sacred. A Kralix will die to protect any cub, not just their own. That is our way. Lix is your first child? Taemin asked. Yes, my mate and I waited many years. When Lix was born, it was the happiest day of my life. Then we discovered the mutation. We took him to the best Kralix doctors. They all said the same thing. Nothing could be done. Vexthor's voice cracked. I carried him to your medical bay thinking he would die. I was preparing to say goodbye. Then you offered hope. You, a human I had barely noticed before. A doctor I had dismissed as unimportant. Taemin looked at the warrior with understanding. I know what it is like to lose someone young. My sister died when I was training to be a doctor. She was sick, but the doctors gave up on her. They said it was too difficult, too risky to try new treatments. I am sorry, Vexthor said quietly. That is why I became a doctor, Taemin continued. I promised myself I would never give up on a patient, never say something is impossible. Every life deserves a fight. Every life has value. Vexthor looked at him with deep respect. This is the human way? It is my way, Taemin said. And yes, many humans believe this. We have a saying from an ancient healer on Earth. It means first, do no harm. But we also believe in fighting for life no matter how hard the battle. They sat together in comfortable silence after that. Two beings from completely different worlds, united by their care for one small life. Hanul came by regularly with food and updates from the ship. She told Taemin that everyone was talking about the surgery. Crew members were making bets on how long before he collapsed from exhaustion. They are also saying you performed a miracle, Hanul added with a smile. Dr. Kethra has been telling everyone about your technique. She says it will change multi-species medicine forever. Taemin just nodded, not really interested in the praise. His focus stayed on his patient. On the third night after surgery, Taemin's worst fear came true. Lix's temperature began to rise. The monitors showed signs of infection. No, Taemin whispered, checking the readings again and again. Not now. Not after everything, Vexthor stood instantly alert. What is wrong? Infection. His body is fighting the surgical changes. His immune system is attacking the biological bridge I created. Taemin worked quickly, trying different medications. He adjusted doses. He tried combination treatments, but nothing worked. Lix's temperature kept climbing. His small body began to shake with fever. Hours passed. Taemin tried everything he could think of. His hands shook with exhaustion and fear. He was losing Lix. After all that work, after the impossible surgery, he was losing him anyway. Is there nothing else? Vexthor asked. The warrior's voice was filled with pain. I do not know what else to try, Taemin admitted. Tears formed in his eyes. I am sorry. I am so sorry. The door to the recovery ward opened. Dr. Kethra entered carrying a small container. She walked directly to the pod. I brought something, she said quietly. It is a rare compound from my homeworld. Very expensive, very hard to obtain. It has powerful antimicrobial properties that work across many species. She handed the container to Taemin. Normally, this is reserved only for important Vryn citizens. But I think this small warrior deserves a chance. You gave him one. Now I am giving him another. Taemin looked at her in surprise. Why would you do this? I know how your people value this medicine. Kethra's compound eyes shimmered. Because you taught me something. You showed me that life has value beyond rank or status or species. You risked everything for this child.
How can I do less?
Taemin took the container with shaking hands. Thank you, he said. Thank you. He administered the medicine carefully, adjusting the dose for Lix's small size. Then they waited. Minutes felt like hours. Taemin, Vexthor, and Kethra stood around the pod watching the monitors. Slowly, gradually, Lix's temperature began to drop. The shaking stopped. The infection markers on the monitor started to decrease. By dawn, the crisis had passed. Lix's fever was gone. His vital signs were stronger than they had been since the surgery. The little cub opened his eyes. They were clear and bright. He looked around the recovery ward with curiosity. His gaze passed over Vexthor, over Kethra, and stopped on Taemin. Lix reached out through the pod's access port with one small, scaled hand. His tiny fingers touched Taemin's hand. The touch was gentle and trusting. It was the gesture of a child recognizing someone who cared for them. Vexthor made a sound like a gasp. He has chosen you, the warrior said, his voice filled with emotion. In our culture, when a cub reaches out like that, it means they recognize a protector, a guardian, a second parent. Taemin looked at the small hand holding his finger. He felt tears run down his face. I will protect him, he said. I promise. Vexthor placed his massive hand on Taemin's shoulder. The touch was gentle despite the warrior's strength. You already have, he said. You gave him life. Now you have given him hope. My family owes you a debt that can never be repaid. Dr. Kethra watched the scene with what might have been a smile on her insect-like face. I think we all learned something important these past few days, she said softly. Hanul entered the recovery ward just in time to see Taemin holding Lix's small hand. She smiled through her own tears. I knew you could do it, she said. I always knew. For the first time in 3 days, Taemin allowed himself to relax. The crisis was over. Lix was going to survive. The little cub made a soft chirping sound as if agreeing. Then he closed his eyes and fell into a peaceful sleep, his tiny hand still holding onto Taemin's finger. 2 weeks had passed since the surgery. Lix was growing stronger every day. He could sit up now, and he made cheerful chirping sounds when people came to visit. His scales had grown brighter and healthier. The small cub looked like a normal, happy child. Taemin checked on him every few hours. Each time, Lix would reach for him with his small hands. The bond between them had grown strong. The cub recognized the human doctor as someone special, someone who cared for him. The medical bay had changed too. Other doctors and nurses now treated Taemin with respect. They asked him questions. They wanted to learn his techniques. The human doctor was no longer an outsider. Dr. Kethra approached him one morning while he was writing notes. Dr. Taemin, she said formally. I have a request. Taemin looked up from his work. Yes? I would like to collaborate with you on a medical journal article. Your surgical technique should be documented and shared across the coalition. Other doctors need to learn this approach. It could save many lives. Kethra paused, then continued. I must also apologize. I was wrong about human medicine. I was wrong about you. My prejudice nearly cost a child his life. I am sorry, Taemin smiled gently. Thank you for the apology. And yes, I would be happy to work with you on the article. We can help more patients together than either of us could alone. News of the successful surgery had spread throughout the ship and beyond. Medical facilities on other coalition ships were sending messages, asking for information. Universities wanted to study the technique. Lix had become famous, and so had his human doctor. But the most important change happened among the Kralix warriors. One evening, Commander Vexthor came to the medical bay in full ceremonial armor. Behind him walked 6 other Kralix warriors also in ceremonial dress. They were the most respected fighters on the ship. Hanul noticed them first. Taemin, she whispered, pulling on his sleeve. I think something important is happening. The medical bay grew quiet as everyone stopped to watch. Even the wounded patients sat up to see what was happening. Vexthor approached Taemin and dropped to one knee. For a warrior of his status, this was an incredible gesture. The other Kralix warriors did the same. Dr. Taemin, Vexthor said in his deep, powerful voice, you saved my son. You gave him life when death was certain. In doing so, you have earned the highest honor my people can give. He pulled out a ceremonial blade and placed it on the floor in front of Taemin. I offer you a place in my clan. You will be recognized as family, as a warrior of the Kralix, as a protector of our young. This has never been offered to a human before. Will you accept?" Taemin stood very still, overwhelmed by the moment. He understood what this meant. The Kralix were proud warriors who rarely showed emotion. For them to offer clan membership to an outsider, to a human, was unheard of. "I accept," Taemin said clearly. "I am honored beyond words." Vexthor stood and placed both hands on Taemin's shoulders. "Then from this day forward you are clan. My family is your family. My son is your son. And all Kralix will know that you are one of us." The other warriors rose and placed their right fists over their hearts, a sign of deep respect. Then they began to chant something in the Kralix language. The sound was deep and rhythmic, filling the medical bay with ancient music. Hanul was crying. Many of the crew members watching had tears in their eyes too. This was history being made. This was the moment when one human earned the complete respect of an entire warrior species. The ceremony ended, but the news spread quickly. Within hours, everyone on the ship knew that Dr. Taemin had been made part of a Kralix clan. The respect he received multiplied overnight. Over the following days, something remarkable happened. Other Kralix warriors began coming to the medical bay. These proud fighters, who normally never showed weakness, came to Taemin with their medical concerns. One warrior came with an old injury that had never healed properly. Another came with chronic pain he had suffered in silence for years. A third came seeking help for a genetic condition he had hidden from everyone. Taemin treated them all with the same care he had shown Lix. He listened to their concerns. He found solutions. He earned their trust, one patient at a time. Hanul teased him about his new fame. "You are a celebrity now," she said with a grin. "The human doctor who won over the Kralix. I should start charging for autographs." Taemin just shook his head. "I am just doing my job. Same as always." "No," Hanul said more seriously. "You are changing minds. You are showing everyone what humans can do. This is bigger than just medicine." She was right. The attitude toward humans on the ship had shifted noticeably. Crew members from various species now sought out human officers for collaboration. The casual dismissal was gone, replaced by genuine respect. A few weeks later, Lix needed one final minor surgery. His body had healed well, but there was one small adjustment needed to complete his recovery. This time it would be a simple procedure. When Taemin announced the surgery, something unexpected happened. Doctors and nurses from multiple species volunteered to assist. They all wanted to observe his techniques. They all wanted to learn. Dr. Kethra organized the observation. "This will be a teaching surgery," she explained. "Dr. Taemin will demonstrate his approach while performing the procedure. Everyone will have a chance to learn." The surgery bay was full of medical staff from across the ship. They watched carefully as Taemin worked. He explained each step, describing his reasoning and technique. "The key is to remember that all living tissue follows certain patterns," he said while working. "Species may be different, but the basic principles of life are universal. You must adapt your knowledge, not abandon it." A young doctor from a species called the Teloth raised a hand. "But how do you know when to adapt and when to follow standard procedure?" Taemin paused his work to answer properly. "You listen to the patient's body. You watch carefully. You stay open to new approaches. Most importantly, you never give up just because something is difficult or unfamiliar." Dr. Kethra spoke up from where she stood observing. "That is what makes Dr. Taemin's approach revolutionary. It is not just technical skill, though he has plenty of that. It is his fundamental belief that every life is worth fighting for, no matter the odds." The surgery proceeded smoothly. Taemin completed the procedure perfectly. Lix came out of anesthesia quickly and without complications. When the little cub opened his eyes, he chirped happily and immediately reached for Taemin. The human doctor picked him up carefully, holding him close. "All done, little one," Taemin said softly. "You are completely healed now." Vexthor entered the recovery area and saw his son awake and happy. The warrior's eyes shone with emotion. "Thank you," he said to Taemin. "Again and always thank you." The medical staff who had observed the surgery left with new knowledge and new respect. They would take what they learned to other ships, other medical bays, other patients. That evening, Hanul brought news to Taemin. The Coalition High Command sent a message. They want to expand the integrated medical program across the entire fleet. They want you to head the initiative. Taemin looked surprised. "Me? Why me?" Hanul laughed. Are you serious? You saved a life that everyone said was impossible to save. You earned the respect of the Kraliks. You changed how people think about human medicine. You are the obvious choice. Taemin thought about it. More ships, more patience, more opportunities to teach and to learn, more chances to prove that every life mattered, regardless of species. He looked at little Lix, now playing happily with his father. He looked at the medical bay, where doctors of many species now work together. He looked at Hanul, his loyal friend who had believed in him from the beginning. Tell them yes, he said. I will do it, Hanul smiled. I knew you would say that. The galaxy needs more doctors like you. Doctors who see patients, not species. Doctors who never give up. The future was full of challenges, but for now, in this moment, everything was perfect. A small cub was healthy and happy. A proud warrior had found an unlikely friend, and one human doctor had proven that compassion could change the galaxy. 3 months had passed since Lix's surgery. The small Kralix cub was now full of energy. He visited the medical bay almost every day, fascinated by the equipment and the doctors who worked there. His favorite person was still Taemin. Lix would sit in a corner of the medical bay on a cushion Taemin had placed there for him. He watched everything with bright, curious eyes. Sometimes he tried to help, bringing small items to the doctors or making happy chirping sounds when patients recovered. He wants to be a doctor like you, Vexthor said with pride one afternoon. The warrior commander visited often to check on his son. Taemin smiled as he watched the cub carefully examining a medical scanner. He would make a good one. He is patient and observant. Those are important qualities. Life on the Eternal Vigil had changed in many ways. The medical bay now operated as a truly integrated team. Doctors from different species worked together, sharing knowledge and techniques. Taemin's surgical methods were being taught at the Coalition Medical Academy. His case study had become required reading. Hanul brought regular reports about the impact of his work. Medical facilities across the fleet are requesting human doctors now, she told him. The waiting list is long. Everyone wants to learn from humans. The respect for humans had spread beyond the medical field too. Human crew members reported better treatment throughout the ship. Alien crew members sought them out for collaboration on various projects. The casual prejudice had mostly disappeared. Then one day, an urgent message arrived. A colony on the planet Velik 4 was under attack by the Scourge. The enemy had surrounded the main settlement. Hundreds of civilians were trapped, including many children from multiple species. The Eternal Vigil was the closest ship. They would lead the rescue mission. Commander Vexithor called a meeting in the medical bay. The rescue will be dangerous, he explained to Taemin and his staff. We expect heavy casualties. The medical team must be ready to handle mass injuries. Taemin nodded. We will be ready. How long until we arrive? 6 hours, Vexthor replied. He looked at his son, who was sitting quietly on his cushion. I have a request. Anything, Taemin said. Vexthor knelt down and spoke directly to Taemin. This mission is more dangerous than any I have faced. If something happens to me, I need to know that Lix is safe. Will you watch over him while I am gone? The trust in that request was enormous. A Kralix warrior, asking a human to protect his most precious treasure. It showed how much had changed. I will protect him with my life, Taemin promised. And I will save every patient we bring back. I swear it. Vexthor placed one large hand on Taemin's shoulder. I know you will. You have already proven what human strength really means. It is not in weapons or size. It is in the refusal to give up. It is in the determination to save lives, no matter the cost. The warrior stood and prepared to leave. Little Lix ran to his father, hugging his leg. Vexthor picked up his son and held him close for a moment. Then he set the cub down gently. Be good for Dr. Taemin, Vexthor said to his son. I will return soon. Lix chirped softly and went to sit by Taemin. The little cub understood somehow that something important was happening. The rescue mission launched. Taemin and his medical team prepared for the worst. They set up extra beds. They organized supplies. They reviewed trauma procedures for multiple species. Hours passed. Then the first transport ships arrived carrying wounded soldiers and rescued civilians. The medical bay exploded into action. Casualties were heavy, just as Vexthor had warned. Soldiers with severe injuries, civilians in shock, children crying for their parents. The medical bay filled quickly, then overflowed into the corridors. Taemin moved through the chaos with calm efficiency. He directed his team, treating the most critical patients himself while ensuring others received proper care. Dr. Kethra worked beside him, their partnership now smooth and effective. Hanul coordinated supplies and communication. "Another transport incoming," she called out. 20 more wounded. The medical team never stopped. They worked for hours without rest. Taemin treated patients from species he had never seen before. He adapted his techniques on the spot, using the principles he believed in. All life follows patterns, and every patient deserves maximum effort. A young Teloth child came in with critical injuries. The attending doctor looked worried. "I do not know this species well enough," she admitted. "Then we learn together," Taemin said, joining her. "Tell me what you do know. We will figure out the rest." They saved the child through teamwork and determination. It was exactly the kind of integrated medicine Taemin had been teaching. More patients kept arriving. The medical team pushed themselves to the limit and beyond. But they did not give up. They had learned from their human colleague that giving up was not an option. Finally, after what felt like days but was only 12 hours, the last patient was stabilized. The medical bay grew quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors. Dr. Kethra approached Taemin with the final casualty report. Her voice was tired but filled with amazement. "We saved everyone. Every single patient who reached the ship alive survived. That has never happened before in a rescue mission this large." Taemin looked around the medical bay at all the recovering patients. His heart swelled with pride, not in himself, but in his team. "We did it together," he said. "Everyone worked as one. This is what integrated medicine can achieve." Commander Vexthor entered the medical bay. His armor was damaged and he was wounded, but he was alive. His eyes immediately found Lix, who was still sitting quietly on his cushion where Taemin had asked him to stay. The cub saw his father and ran to him, chirping happily. Vexthor picked up his son and held him close, his massive body shaking with relief. Then the warrior looked at Taemin. He saw the exhaustion on the doctor's face. He saw the blood on his medical coat. He saw the determination that never wavered. Vexthor walked over to Taemin and placed his free hand on the doctor's shoulder. "You kept your promise. You protected my son, and you saved every life that came through those doors." "We all did," Taemin replied, gesturing to his team. "Yes," Vexthor agreed. "But you showed them how. You showed all of us what true strength looks like." He looked around the medical bay at the wounded soldiers and civilians from many species, all alive because of the medical team's efforts. "When you saved my son," Vexthor continued, "you taught an entire fleet what it means to be truly strong. You showed us that humans have something we did not understand. An unbreakable will to preserve life. A refusal to accept defeat. A compassion that extends to all beings." Hanul arrived with more news. The Coalition High Command sent another message. They are expanding the integrated medical program to all military and civilian facilities. They want to use the Eternal Vigil as the training center, and they want Dr. Taemin to lead the entire initiative. The medical bay staff erupted in cheers. Tired as they were, they celebrated this recognition of their work. Taemin felt overwhelmed. He thought back to when he first joined the ship, when aliens dismissed him as weak and inferior. He thought about his sister, and the promise he made at her grave. He thought about Lix, the small cub who had changed everything. "I accept," he said quietly. "There are more lives to save, more bridges to build, more people to teach. The work is just beginning." Vexthor nodded with satisfaction. He looked down at his son who was reaching toward Taemin with his small hands. The warrior smiled and carried Lix over to the doctor. Taemin took the cub and held him gently. Lix nuzzled against his chest, completely trusting and content. "You saved one small cub. Vexthor said softly. But in doing so, you changed everything. You showed the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength is not in weapons or ships. It is in your hearts, in your determination, in your belief that every life matters. He placed his hand over his heart in the Krallick's gesture of deepest respect. This is the human way, and it is a good way. Around the medical bay, staff from many species placed their hands over their hearts too. They had all learned something important. They had all been changed by working alongside this quiet human doctor who refused to give up. Hanul stood beside her friend, tears running down her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You proved what I always knew, that humans belong here, that we have something important to contribute." Taemin looked at the people around him, his team, his patients, his friends, Vexthor and Little Lix, all the species working together, united by a common purpose. The war against the Scourge would continue. There would be more battles, more casualties, more challenges ahead. But something fundamental had changed. Humanity had proven its worth, not through violence, but through compassion. Not through dominance, but through dedication to preserving life. Little Lix made a soft chirping sound and looked up at Taemin with trusting eyes. The small cub who had been dying was now healthy and happy, a living symbol of what was possible when you refuse to give up. Taemin smiled and hugged the cub gently. "We will save many more," he promised. "Together we will show the galaxy what it truly means to be strong." And in that moment, surrounded by beings from across the stars, a human doctor held a small alien child and knew that he had found his place in the universe. Not as a warrior, not as a conqueror, but as a healer.